What is up, everyone? Welcome to Forward Progress, which is powered by the Hammer Betting Network. This week, one time only, I will be hosting myself, Clive Bixby, and I am joined by Eric Eager this week from Sumer Sports. How's it going today, Eric?
Clive, it's great. First time we've ever gotten to talk to each other other than in Twitter and Twitter DMs, but it'll be
I know.
fun to recap this week and look forward to next week.
Yeah, so we're live on the Forward Progress YouTube channel, live on Twitch, and on the Forward NFL Twitter channel and the Hammer HQ. So let's get into it. How did the day go for you from a betting perspective?
I think things went well. We had a read on the Seahawks early when they opened that at 3.5, kind of right around this time last week. That quickly, that got pretty good line value. All the way till today, where you saw in some shops, the Cincinnati Bengals all the way down to -7 after they were -7.5 most of the week. That one cashed easily, so it was a good week. I kind of wish Washington would have won that game outright, but they ended up covering at least the best of it against Minnesota, and even a weird under that I had when I was on Gil Alexander's show and bet myself, which was New England versus Indianapolis. That one was a cinch.
Nice. So for me, it was a light week. I had a move in my personal life, so I'm at my new place now. But I did have a couple plays today. I took what did I take today? Let's see. I gotta look through everything. I took the Chargers money line today, a little bit before game time. That was the only play I made today, and that was a little touch and go there. And then earlier in the week, I had a play on the under 42.5 for the Rams-Bucks game, which never really looked like it was in much doubt. And then the last piece I have left, which the line hasn't really moved in my direction, is the Ravens -3 at even money tomorrow. So that's the last piece that I have going. I don't know if you have anything on tomorrow. Actually, I do think you have something on tomorrow's games. I saw that for that list that you were just referring to. What do you have, 2.5?
Yeah, when I was on Gil's show, I took Ravens -2.5. The markets moved against me. I think that it's all about Ravens injuries, right? It's Andrews. Sure. It's obviously Bateman's out for the season. Calais Campbell had a small surgery recently, and I think in general they're just more of an injured team, right? Like they get injured more often in game and stuff. Whereas you look at New Orleans, like they're coming off a strong effort against the Vegas Raiders. Now, I wonder if folks look at that now after the Raiders blew their third 17-point lead, this time against the Jaguars team that has been unable to win one-score games. They blew that lead after looking really good in the first half. I wonder if people are maybe a little too high on New Orleans.
Yeah, that's a team I've struggled trying to understand all season. And anybody joining us for the first time, what we're going to do now is we're going to review Week 9 for the NFL. We'll do a little preview of what's coming tomorrow night for Monday Night Football. Then we're going to go through what's happening in Week 10, go through the lines, where we think they're going to open, which direction they're going to go, sides, totals. If you can't stick around for the show, we will release the recording for normal podcast format, so it'll be available on Spotify and Apple Music as well. So anything that you felt strongly about this week that came to fruition, that was like, all right, I thought this, I was really firm, really confident in this, and this really kind of came true?
Yeah, for me it was Seattle. In fact, it was two teams that I think are, one of them is actually hitting on what I think their fundamentals are, and one of them that I think wasn't, but came through today after beating up a big deficit. It was Seattle and Jacksonville. I was a little bit against Jacksonville when they had those two blowout victories, one against the Colts, one against the Chargers. And Rob, the co-host, when we were on the Monday night show, he was quick to tell me like how good their net success rate was and everything, and I was sort of buying into them, especially after looking at some of their like third down efficiency versus early down efficiency, And, I think both of those short underdogs, really happy to see those come through. How about you?
For me, it's still Green Bay. I just can't get over the fact of how bad that they are offensively. Um, just really god awful, terrible offensive team. And I mean, Aaron Rodgers ended up being the leading rusher today for Green Bay. I think he threw 3 picks. It's a really rough scene over there now. That was one, and then the other one's actually the Dolphins' defense is being pretty porous and maybe undisciplined is a word that I would use. They got kind of torched today. I mean, Justin Fields has been playing better these last few weeks, and when we get into what's surprising, he'll come up there, but just their defense has not been up to snuff at all.
Yeah, that one's weird, right? Because you think like getting Melvin Ingram, I think that their big thought process there was we're one of the worst teams in the league in terms of getting pressure out of four-man rushes. You get a guy in there that can rush. Now he was only like 38th going into the week in terms of PFF's like win rate rushing the passer. He's nowhere close to being one of the better ones in ESPN. I think that it's sort of, it's one of those where I just, edge is a good position to bring in midseason because it's an easy position to play, mentally. But to ask him to be the savior of that defense, I felt was just like a little too much. And, you saw today, in that game, like they got a lot of problems. Like their secondary isn't as good as we thought it was. And, when you play as much man coverage as they do, the quarterback can run quite a bit on you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a negative of that scheme. So that being said, that's kind of what we thought and was solidified. What about surprises? I mean, maybe I'll go first for surprises. The Bills, for sure, was a surprise today. I think Josh Allen really didn't look like Josh Allen. Part of that, I think, is, I think the Jets did a pretty good job. That was the game that I had on in my local area that I was able to watch, pretty much beginning to end. That was one. And Zach Wilson definitely wasn't as bad as he was the previous week, where Rob and I were basically killing him for his performance. And I mean, we talked about that, right? He has ranges, right? Like the bottom of his range is really bad. I still don't think he has a high top end, but if he's not turning the ball over and he's, running the ball effectively, like when he's pressured and scrambling well, he could do okay.
No, I agree with you. I think, I do think the Jets were a big one. Now they did take sharp money, it looked like, to bet that number down on close. So I think in a year where, quarterback play isn't that good, defense matters more than it usually does. Usually I think a lot of the pundits and everything are much more into defense than it is warranted. But, in a league where, like today, you're seeing Patrick Mahomes isn't having a great game tonight right now, and Josh Allen didn't have a great game. If that happens, it comes down to, okay, do you have a good defense? You look at like Jordan Whitehead, you look at LaMarcus Joyner, CJ Mosley coming back and playing well finally, Carl Lawson coming back from injury, Sauce Gardner, of course, being the best player on that defense. And, defense can carry you a little bit more than previously thought. I mean, for me, like when I look at surprises, it's some of these elite teams, like you said, playing down to the opponent. So the Eagles were in a meat grinder with Houston for most of Thursday. Obviously, the Chiefs right now are trailing by 1.5 to the Titans going into the fourth quarter. The Bills, Josh Allen played poorly in that game. So those three kind of what we would consider elite teams that were in their own equivalence class, a standard deviation better than everybody else, played down to their opponents this week. And I felt like that was a really big surprise. When you look at everything else, it's like, the teams that we really thought were going to be weak in the NFL, the Texans, the Bears, the Seahawks, obviously, they've gotten out of that rut. The Falcons, all those teams are, depending upon where you get the number, they're covering every week, right? And so, or seemingly every week. And so I think that is a surprise as well.
Yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of line movement on the Bills Jets. That opened at 13, closed at I think 10.5, and the total went from 48 to 46. That was the biggest mover I think overall of the week. Um, so that was significant. And then, we briefly did mention, or I briefly mentioned, I guess, Justin Fields and the Bears offense, where the last few weeks, I think they're utilizing his legs a lot more. And, they are able to move the ball that way. I still don't think he's a great throwing quarterback. I don't think there's been any evidence to prove that part of it wrong. But if he can extend drives and come up with some big plays, that's how they're going to get some points on the board.
Yeah, and just from what I know within the league, like I think it was very clear that the Bears were 50-50 on Fields at best, right? And they early in the season they called their plays sort of in a way that made sense relative to that, and then now they get him Claypool. It looks like they realize that they probably won too many games to be in the sweepstakes for one of the top quarterbacks, and I also think the top quarterbacks, namely Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, are not playing to the level of like tank for them, no matter what type of level. So they go and get Claypool. They're trying to evaluate Fields now, which I think is a better outcome than Fields could have asked for going into the year.
Yeah. So that being said, any opinions of yours change greatly after this week? Like we're talking about quarterback play, but I don't think it's fair for us to assume that quarterbacks are always going to play at the top of the range. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, I think the expectations are so high and so ridiculous of what they're going to do week in and week out. Any opinions of yours that have changed on teams where you're going to kind of grade them more significantly up or down? And we'll get to Josh's comment here too.
I think Justin Fields is on track to be the best player in that class among quarterbacks. Like, I think that's kind of damning with faint praise, though, in the sense that it is a little bit strange that none of those players have played well. I think Lawrence played good today. That helps. But as far as the Eagles, the Bills, and the Chiefs, I think my opinion is now like those. I just don't know if it's a league where you can reliably lay more than 2 scores with any team, and that includes those top 3 teams. And I don't think it's a league where any one team can't cover a spread of more than 2 scores. Like, last year's Giants were one where like you just could not take the points with them at some point in time. I don't think that's the case this year.
Yeah, I think that's happening a lot too. Like last year, the Lions were the team that just always managed to find a way to cover. This year, it seems like some of these 10, 11, 12, 13-point spreads, they seem to get covered much, much more frequently. And it looks like we're about to have a punt. Ooh, there was a lot of contact on that play.
Yeah, that looked like a I think Austin Hooper was fairly physical with Mike Hughes, but that also feels like if this game's played at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, that's a penalty.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good no call. I'd like to see more of that in the NFL, where they just kind of let them play when both of them are kind of.
Well, especially if it's a no. Like I had a little bit of Willis over like $143 passing yards, and he's at 83 now. I don't think he had a single passing yard in the third quarter. So I don't want him being bailed out on plays where he doesn't really have a chance, like that one.
Yeah, that's also fair. So opinions of teams that have changed a lot for me. I don't think there's anything overly crazy for me in that respect. I mean, I think the Bengals offense, they looked great today, but it's just a bad situation in Carolina right now anyway. So it's not like I would change them from a grade perspective all that much. I think maybe I tick the Jets up a notch, but I'm not going to go crazy. So I guess, do we think people are going to overreact to the Jets this week because they got an outright win at home against Buffalo?
Yeah, the Jets just lost to Mac Jones and the Patriots, a team that I don't think is particularly good. Like, I think that the problem is you really do have to take the good with the bad with all these teams.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff happens week in, week out, right? I think that's when you talk about, public betting perceptions, and when you start seeing splits on things like that, it's normally overreacting to 1 week here or there. You mentioned the Raiders blew another 17-point lead. The Chargers probably they won a coin flip against Atlanta. I think that's a 6-point game if the who hits that field goal. I think it was a 50-yarder he missed. That goes to a 6-point game at that stage, and who knows where it goes. What about this game? So Chiefs Titans, right? Like if this game ends up Titans winning, 17-9 and holding, do you think there's a giant overreaction to either of those teams in the market next week?
Maybe. I mean, we did see when Kansas City lost to Indianapolis. I think this is a game in a similar equivalence class, right? Like they went from being like short favorites against Tampa Bay to being short underdogs. Now that went through 0, so it's not that big of a deal. I think that the issue is like public perception doesn't really move money or move lines, right? It's people with real money, and I think people with real money are have kind of the same process that you just described, which is you certainly reevaluate things, but you don't go crazy on them.
Yeah, it's a matter of I think how fast you start to get rid of your priors, and the market I think is still holding on to priors for the Packers. Like, are they really a league average team right now? Like they're based on what you look at. Like if you look at Unpredictable or a couple of other different sites for ratings, like they're still 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that range. Do they really deserve to be anymore? Probably not.
They can't move. I mean, if you can't move, like this is why I think like it was sharp to start betting Seattle. It's like to me the biggest indicator of whether or not a team is good is can they move the football. Everything else is kind of noise. Can you move the football reliably? And I think that for the most part, like the Packers can't move the football anymore.
No, I mean, just at the receiver.
They're just going to struggle to be a team. Like if their defense rounds into form, that's awesome. They only gave up 15 points today. I think some of that is Jared Goff and the Lions, but some of that is just, it's just random noise most of the time. But if you can't move the football on offense, like you can't really, to me, you can't garner betting support, in any real fundamental way.
And I think it's clear how good of a wide receiver Davante Adams is too. I mean, he is just still absolutely like torching defenses with Derek Carr as his quarterback. So, I don't think you can make the case that is a result of Aaron Rodgers. It obviously didn't hurt, but I mean, Davante Adams is just an absolute beast, and they don't have anybody to replace him with in Green Bay.
Yeah, no, and they tried to replace him in the aggregate, and we're seeing like, the Chiefs actually struggling in doing that tonight in this game against the Titans at home. But it's just hard. And that offense was much more dependent on, a quarterback just making plays to one guy. And, you saw it in the playoffs when your offense is that fragile, right? You depend so much on one player. You can get got when you play a strong defense. And, you saw it, you've seen it all year this year. Even when they won football games against the Bears and so on, like it wasn't like the pretty kind of performance. They were depending on running backs and things that I don't think are particularly sustainable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's going to make San Francisco so dangerous is, like you mentioned, right? You were just talking about before the defenses and how important that they could be in a season like this where, the quarterbacks are truly the separators. Now if they have weapons that are healthy and they have their defense, if they have McCaffrey and Debo that are options to continuously move the football and be creative, that can be dangerous. So they're a team that I'm going to look at this week and just, see what they do against the Chargers. And I think they can be really dangerous in the NFC. I'm not completely sold on the Eagles yet either, though. Not the way that I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, that's a good notion. I mean, I think that the issue with the Eagles is that you just don't know the limitations of the quarterback position when they haven't been explicitly tested all year.
Totally 100% agree with that. Seahawks still they're averaging probably being graded as maybe a little bit worse than a league average team, probably somewhere in the 16 to 20 range. What about now? Do you move them up at all against that rating? Like move them to 14, 15? Like,
yeah, it's crazy because like and I left PFF like right around the beginning of the year, so like I was responsible for some of their ratings, and like I have like a little variable that I would always put basically next to teams that I thought were terrible. And like, it was just kind of like a tanking variable. So you'd always like apply it to Detroit or the Jets or, the Seahawks this year. And like, I feel like that needs to be lifted. It's clear that they hit on a draft class that's like 2017 Saints, right? Where you have, Lucas, Cross, Kenneth Walker looks great. Tarek Woolen looks good. And then you have a quarterback coming out of nowhere. Like, I think it's not even just luck anymore. It's not even, good fortune. It's like they're fundamentally a good football team. And I think that, they have to be graded as such, I believe.
Yeah. All right. So that being said, this game is, getting deeper into the fourth quarter. What about Monday Night Football? Let's preview that a little bit. Both of us, we're on the Ravens, like you mentioned, the injury factor. What else are you looking at for Monday night's game tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm looking at how, the Saints, who are pretty good defensively, at least I think in their first string, how much pressure can they get on Lamar Jackson? Because I think if he's allowed to sit back there and throw, he's been a decent passer this year. He's gotten worse over time, but I think he regained it a little bit last week. No Gus Edwards, who I actually think is the difference maker in their particular scheme. Andrews is another one. So then it comes right back to the other side where it's okay, Andy Dalton in prime time, are they going to get Andy Dalton to throw them the ball a little bit? Because I feel like that, the Ravens are probably going to have a hard time putting up 24 to 31 points. So I think it's got to be defense. And I think, the question is how much can Dalton repeat what he's been doing?
So do you have a feel on the total for that game?
I mean, I think it's under, if anything. And to me, I think you have to look at the Saints. They want to get into sync with Kamara. They have no Michael Thomas for the foreseeable future. I know Olave's been wonderful. No real tight end threat to speak of. Offensive line is a little bit more banged up. The Ravens, to their credit, Justin Houston's had a great year. They have some players up front that can make it pay. It's just their defense is going to have to step up and play well, because I don't necessarily see them being able to do a really good job on offense.
Yeah. And without, Bateman, I think you could really see how much damage he was under, or, how affected he was last week. He just didn't look like himself. So, that wasn't as surprising as I would say. It was not surprising at all. I think it was more hope for me, because I did have a little bit of a Super Bowl future on the Ravens. That not what I wanted to see. But it's going to be an interesting game tomorrow, because the Saints have been a team that I've had a hard time judging. I keep thinking that their defense might be better than it is. I don't know how much of it's turnover luck. I can't love Andy Dalton. I don't know how anybody can. But we'll see how that game plays out. Hopefully, both of us end up with a W on the old chalkboard for that one. But we'll see how it plays out. Yep. Looks like we have a question, from Scott Davish, Eagles fan, and not exactly confident come playoff time that they're beating San Francisco or Dallas. And I kind of agree with that. When you have a team that's going to be able to, one, pressure the quarterback and really scheme for Jalen Hurts, is he going to be able to win with his arm? I don't know. I don't see that team surprising the way that they have in the beginning of the season. I think they start to regress a little bit the more that, they have stuff put on tape. I don't know. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's weird. Even within games, it's been that way, right? Where and it wasn't this way against the Titans, or the Texans, I'm sorry, but they get out ahead, and there were a couple games where they scored 24 points in the second quarter and don't score the rest of the game. I do think that, Steichen, Sirianni, I think they're good game planners. I think Sirianni does right now, I have Sirianni about a quarter of a win, or, almost a half of a win better than expectation in terms of, decisions. So fourth downs, 2-point conversions, not blowing timeouts. He's the best in football right now. So he adds that. But I think once the gimmicky, gadgety stuff is no longer, it does put some pressure on Hurts. And the point, they've had leads in every single game. They had to come back against Dallas and cover that spread again after they got caught from behind by Cooper Rush. They had to come back and win against Arizona after Arizona came back from 14 down. So they've meandered during the middle of those games. But we really haven't seen Jalen Hurts play from behind, and I think that's obviously a huge test for every single quarterback is how well you do when things are difficult.
Yeah, that he hasn't really had that real adversity test and gone through the playoffs, and that's kind of a rite of passage. It's not too often where a quarterback can really just kind of have a breakout season and then just power his way through the playoffs. That really just doesn't happen all that often. You start to see things where either a quarterback doesn't protect the football as well as he should, or tries to force plays downfield where he shouldn't, and not necessarily just take what's given. So it's they're an interesting team. I've been under the impression that the NFC is completely up for grabs. Where I could see a situation where the Bengals last year, who I think really managed to be at the top of their range for outcomes. I don't think they were a particularly great team, but things just happened to work out for them. I think you could see the same type of thing happen in the NFC this year.
Right. So like a team if Tampa Bay gets in, if the Rams get in, like those teams appear deader than anything right now. But to your point, like at this time last year, we were watching Cleveland go into Cincinnati and win by like 30. And then them they lost to the Jets. I can't remember before or after that game. And then of course they hit a run of good play, and not only that, but like good luck, right? With 4 straight 1-score wins with Joe Burrow at the helm. You could see a team get hot like that in the NFC. I mean, Dallas to me is the team where if Dak Prescott, who's never been a really good injured quarterback, if that makes sense, like I always feel like when he's healthy, he's great. When he's hurt, like the wheels fall off. If he can regain his health, I think Mike McCarthy's doing a good job this year. I think Kellen Moore is a very underrated play caller. Like that's the team to me that could sneak through as a wild card team and make a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny the way that you can see players like Dak Prescott, where there's been expectation, and then occasionally they get more like written off, and there's not that same level of expectation, and that's kind of when they break through. And that defense is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
All right, one more. Josh Cooper, how high is the Seahawks ceiling in the NFC?
I mean,
that's an interesting. Go ahead.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it. I have maybe an interesting answer, but go for it.
I think because of their defense, I don't think their ceiling is that high. I don't think they're going to win a shootout against a team like Dallas, like Philadelphia, like San Francisco, who have really, really strong defenses. They haven't had that challenge yet. So I don't see that same level of offense being able to carry over against those particular teams. But that's just my initial take.
Yeah, I think like there's so much defensive attrition in the NFL that I think that their offense, if it stays healthy, obviously both tackles, both wide receivers, they had the scare with Metcalf, running back with Walker, and Geno, of course. Like I think their offense is going to be good enough. Like to me, it's okay. Can their defense stay healthy? Can the playmakers there? They get brought back Bruce Irvin, and the guy had another sack today. It's all about, for me, health. If they stay healthy, like the rest of the league, atrophies to a certain extent, and they have a shot. I mean, the only team I don't think that they would have a shot against is a full, they're kind of like isomorphic to the Eagles, like in that they like to run the football. Their quarterback kind of does the bare minimum thing, and that can really hurt you when you're behind. But if you're playing from ahead, like that's an easy way to go. So if all the teams in the NFC are like that, including Dallas with that defense, then Seattle just I think that they're one of those teams that needs 2 lucky things to happen in the playoffs to make the Super Bowl, but that's okay.
I mean, it happened with the Bengals last year. I mean, it's kind of that type of situation. So I guess when you think of ceiling, it's it can be high. I just think that the probability is low. But same thing with the Bengals last year. So I mean, they have talent. It's not that they don't. It's just are they going to be able to beat two of those good defenses? I don't know. I don't think so. But I think we could probably move on now to looking at the lines of what we're thinking about next week. So we have a Thursday night game. We have the Falcons and the Panthers. Panthers are at home. Panthers just got ripped to shreds by the Bengals today. And Atlanta held their own. Probably had a really good shot to win that game against the Chargers today. What are your initial thoughts there? Do you have a number that you would open the game at?
Yeah, I'd probably put Falcons -3.5 on the road. Total probably at like 41.5 or so. Like I just think, with that team, it's like, the Falcons are efficient. When you talk about throwing the ball, running the ball, middle of the pack throwing, maybe even a little bit higher, running the football, they're one of the better teams in the league as far as like scheme and all that kind of stuff. The Panthers, they've had good games defensively, but they've almost always been against bad offenses. It depends upon who starts for them at quarterback, whether it's Walker or whether it's Mayfield. But I think that there's like a pretty, there's a pretty good idea of what a run by Mahomes, by the way. Holy buckets. There's like with the Panthers, like the quarterback situation, I think muddies it a little. I think you have lower variance with Mayfield than you do with Walker, but I think the means are about the same. So that is 3.5, 41 as well, 41.5 as well. Put it.
Okay, I'm thinking a little bit less. I don't think that the Falcons are good enough, or at least perceived well enough at the market at this point, to open at that number where you're going to cross over the 3 on the road. I would have it probably at like 1.5, and I don't know what was the Panthers Bengals game today? 42.5. It opened 43.5. I think went to 42.5. I think 42.5 is probably a good number. But I think if the number was 1.5, I do think it would move towards the Falcons for sure. Where do you think it settles? Do you think if it opens at 3.5, do you think it stays there, or do you think it goes closer to 3?
Yeah, I think it doesn't. I think you get Panthers money at 3.5 for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're on the same page there. Not a game I'm particularly excited to watch either on a Thursday night. We have not had a good Thursday night slate at all. And Kansas City is moving and driving down the field with about 6 minutes left. Let's see where this goes. Got a game in Germany this week, I believe. Seahawks in Tampa Bay. Interesting, because you got to take out the home field for that. That being said, I mean, we just talked about, do we tick the Seahawks up at all, and do you knock Tampa Bay down? I mean, Tampa Bay seems to be continuously in that, if you want to call it the bottom end of that second tier of teams, or if you keep the Chiefs and the Eagles as a second tier of themselves, they're in that third tier where they're separated from the rest of the teams. I don't know. I probably tick Tampa down a little bit based off of what we see in the market. Seattle probably up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe Tampa 1.5, something like that on a neutral field in Germany. I don't really know how else to kind of, where to lean here.
There's injuries to Tampa's defense, right? Like you have Barrett, you have the safety Antoine Winfield Jr. So there are issues there. I think if their defense is like fully fledged, like I think that's where you can have the issues with Geno Smith, of course. But their offense can't move the football, So and especially it doesn't seem like they want to, right? Like they had 0.45 negative EPA running the football today. And it's just something that they're committed to, and it's something they're committed to be bad doing. So that's like my only concern, is that there's like an issue with I just don't think that they're good enough moving the football. So, yeah, I put Tampa maybe -1.5. And then I think the total on that game, that's where it gets a little interesting because Seattle has had high total games. The Bucks have not. So I'll put the total at like 44.5.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking total around 43.5, 44, somewhere in that range. So we're kind of in the same ballpark there too. I never really know how to gauge a total, when you're going into Europe for those types of situations. But you bring up a good point, and I think Rob and I have talked about this a little bit too, with Tampa just committing and committing and committing to the run. When Tampa finally moved the ball is when they had 44 seconds to move the ball down the field, and they couldn't really, count on the run. So it's almost like I feel like at some point Bowles needs to make an adjustment, and Leftwich need to say, just let's back off of that a little bit, because they're literally running themselves into a brick wall. They're probably the worst running football team in the league right now.
Yeah, and their running back is not particularly like talented either. It's not they're not run blocking well, but their running back is not very talented. So it's kind of a very like rough situation for them for sure.
Did I just see what I think I saw? Do we have a score here?
I think Mahomes just ran it in from like 18 out. Well, that drive, Mahomes picked up a 3rd and 17 with his legs, and then he just picked up a 3rd and 8 with like his. Yeah, that's a big boy drive for the Chiefs, like 93 yards. Mahomes kind of doing his thing. I do think here's like a little bit of gameplay for you're a better. I think you understand the probabilities and stuff. Like I get a little sad when I see a team down 8 playing like they're down 1 score, right? They might convert this 2-pointer. They're not a great short yardage team, but with Derrick Henry on the other side and Andy Reid as your coach with not a great, track record in terms of time management, like 3 minutes left with the 2-point conversion in front of you feels a little rough for me, but we'll see if the Chiefs can convert this. I might be behind you.
I see a flag in the end zone here. I think defensive holding. So they might get another crack at this.
Okay, so they're actually like spying Mahomes, huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
There's there's flags everywhere. Which I actually like. I'm actually like more nervous about the Chiefs needing 1 yard than 2. That I know that's irrational, but like I could just see them like trying to run the I formation, hand the ball to Pacheco or something, and lose this game. But it looks like they're going to get another shot at it. That didn't look like a great play either. It looks like the Mahomes is not throwing with the kind of rhythm and stuff that he's I would wish he would.
All right, yeah, so 3 flags offsetting 2 defensive holdings, and then I couldn't see what the other flag was on the offense. All right, so we got that Germany game. Now we can get into the 1 o'clock slate, and let's go Browns at Miami. Browns coming off of a bye week. Miami playing the Bears this week. I'll let you lead this one.
Yeah, I think Cleveland's better than what people believe, especially early in games. I also think, to your point, when you talked about the defenses for Miami, it's a little, Miami's defense was shown out a little bit here. You get a week of rest and some pretty good health for, the Browns. So I'll say Cleveland plus 4.5, and I'll say the total is 48.5.
Okay. I was at -4, so we're kind of in the same ballpark there, but I was leaning more towards 4.5, so I agree with you on that. I have a hard time with the total, but Cleveland's defense has been really, really, really bad too. The Bears ineligible. Thank you, Scott. So the Bears Dolphins game I think closed at 46.5, up from 45.5. I think 48.5 is a pretty good number there. I wouldn't come off of that. And I actually think there's a good chance that gets bet up too.
Yeah. Just the part, like you think about the outs in that game, right? So like last week when Detroit got up 14-0, I texted a friend and I was like, Tyreek Hill's gonna have 200 yards in this game, just because when they're behind, they're throwing a hill all over the place. Denzel Ward's been banged up. Newsom has been kind of whatever. Greedy Williams has kind of been whatever. and there's been injuries there too. Safety's been terrible for Cleveland. So even though the pass rush is good for Cleveland, the coverage is terrible. So if Cleveland gets up like 14-0, let's say, like the over's a cinch, right? And I think Brissett is a much better quarterback than people give him credit for. And so I think that he ends up being also a player that can put up some points in this game.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at how the Lions game played against Miami last week. Like that game was like 28 points in the first quarter or something ridiculous like that. So yeah, totally agree with that. That's a very likely game flow scenario. Let's see. The next game I'm looking at is Denver, Tennessee. So we can skip that since, this game's still going on. All right. So the other half of the Dolphins game this week, the Bears. So Detroit at Chicago. Detroit beats Green Bay this week. Chicago gives Miami a run for their money. And if Miami doesn't return a block punt for a touchdown, that could have gone another direction. Do you tick any of these teams up after this week, or do you still just leave them where they were? Or do you upgrade one, upgrade two?
I mean, I was high on the Lions going into the year. I think the Lions have had some bad luck, but also have had some bad things happen. They had the 48-45 loss to Seattle. Since then, they've only scored in one second half of a game, and that was this week where they scored 7 against Green Bay. They've only scored in 3 halves of football since that Seattle game. So I think early in the year, everybody's like, oh, they're the highest scoring team in football. They're the lowest, worst defense in football, blah, blah, blah. I think that is a little bit of a misnomer. I think that Detroit has settled into being kind of a mediocre offense. And I think their defense is maybe a little bit underrated. I also think that, this is a classic one where the Bears, have had 2 great offensive performances in a row, but in large part because they were so behind in some of those games that they came back and look, those points count. But I would go Chicago at home. I go Chicago -1.5. I would make the total in the mid 40s, not the high 40s, which I think a lot of people are going to say high 40s, but I'll make it 46.
Okay. I have 46.5 and Bears -1.5 too. So we have the exact same number there. And I'm not sure which way the total goes. I think I agree with your thought that if you open it around 46 or 47, I think the public's going to want to bet over. But I don't know that that's the right play there. So Malik will. Ooh, all right. So not bad. So we're pretty much on the same page in most of these. We've only had one relative disagreement so far, and that was the Falcons-Panthers. Let's see. Where do we want to go next? Houston at the Giants. Giants bye week. Houston played on Thursday. I am so down on the Texans, and this might just be an overreaction. I know they played a little bit better and gave Philly a little bit of a run this week in terms of, covering, I guess, and played tight in the first half. I don't know if this is too much for the Giants, for a team that both teams are probably in the lower third of the league in terms of market ratings. I don't know. At Giants at home, I have Giants -6, but I don't think anybody wants to lay 6 with the Giants. So I think it's kind of a Patriots Colts situation where, it opens maybe at 6 and then starts getting bet down 5.5, 5, and I'm not sure where it ends up.
Yeah, I think Giants, are -5.5, -6. I would say the total is probably 39.5. It's not a high total.
Yeah. I'd probably have it a touch higher, but I also think it would get bet down. I think neither one of these teams is going to be looking to, I think, throw the football all over the field either. I think they're going to try and look to run the ball and be successful that way. So I think a lower total definitely makes sense. That'll be an interesting game to kind of watch and see from a game flow perspective how that goes. Let's see, what other 1 o'clock games do we have?
So the answer, somebody had a good question in the chat, would you use Giants in Survivor? And I think that's a really good question, because I think 2 years ago, or maybe last year, when the Texans were really doing their mega church rebuild, all that stuff, I probably would consider, I think the Texans are not significantly better than last year, but I think for the first time in 2 years, they're an NFL team, if that makes sense. So, like, I don't think that I would bet again. I wouldn't take a team like the Giants, who I think, like you said, is lower third. I wouldn't take them against a team like Houston in Survivor just because it's Houston.
Totally, I totally agree with that mindset, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of fall into faulty thinking and understanding that just because a team is horrendous, just understanding ranges of outcomes and probabilities. I mean, it also obviously has a lot to do with who you have left. That's obviously, a big part of this too. How many opponents are left, how many people have been eliminated. So, I mean, there's a lot to think through. But that would not be my initial thought to use them. As I look through the rest of the slate, though, I think that's probably outside of the Bills, Eagles, and Chiefs next week. I think that's going to be the next biggest favorite on the board as I'm looking through it. So we can keep going and see, where that ends up. Let's see, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Chiefs. We can get into that as this game ends, and we can go back to the Denver Titans game too, as it looks like Tennessee 4th and 14. They're punting it away, so the Chiefs are going to have a drive to end the game, hopefully. So 1:00 game, Vikings Bills. So this is an interesting one. Bills come off a loss to the Jets on the road. Jets probably an underrated team slightly, but the Vikings have been at that, I don't know, probably the top of the third tier, I guess, where the market just keeps having them, be like 3-point favorites to everybody. Which way did the line move today?
It went down to, it took some Washington money, but like to your point,
Yeah.
The Vikings are 7-1. I think they're 3-4-1 against the number, depending upon where it closes and what number you did get. So like it's not they're not exactly covering, right? Like the way the Giants are covering, but that's because I think it's weird. Like I do think the market is giving them more respect than like analytics folks are.
Same.
But they're also not covering the number very often, so it's kind of interesting, right? They didn't cover against the Saints. They didn't cover against the Bears. They didn't cover today against Washington. They covered the intermediate 2 weeks, but like they've covered against the Packers, but every other game they've struggled to cover. So I think the market is actually respecting the Vikings, as you said, like the top of the third tier where, I mean, they were down 10 points to this Washington team today.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think they belong there. That being said, perception and the market, I think if the Bills opened at 7, I think the Bills would get money. I think the public would be a little bit like shaky because you have a 7-1 team getting a touchdown. I kind of struggled with this a little bit. I mean, I could see it being anywhere 7.5. A highly juiced 7, but I wouldn't be shocked if it opened at 8 either. If you make me open it, I open it at 7.5 and see what happens from there.
Yeah, I think it's 8. I think the total's lower than two good quarterbacks wouldn't give rise to. So I think 43.5 should be the total.
Okay.
I just think the Vikings are the kind of team that will get swallowed up by a Bills defense. They got swallowed up by a Washington defense this week, right? So, and I think the Bills will, kind of like they did against Green Bay, will let the foot off the gas a little bit in important moments, and that will keep the total from going over.
Yeah, and Randy Mitchell in the chat throws that Josh Allen may have a UCL injury. I did see a couple of Twitter posts about that today, too, that his elbow is under question.
I mean, UCL is like Tommy John out for 12 months type of thing, like that.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's that bad. He was able.
Yeah, that would make this a Case Keenum revenge game. One of many possible.
So to that point, no, it doesn't account for it if Josh Allen's out, obviously. And that would be obviously a back-breaking injury. So you think 8. I'm at 7.5, so not too far off there either. A sprain is playable. It still did look like he was able to throw the ball today. That was a game I was able to watch. He didn't look great, but I think that it was more his decision making that I saw that was a little bit shaky today. He wasn't able to get out in the open field as much as he usually is. So that's what I saw today. But I mean, if the elbows hurt too, then obviously that's kind of a big deal. But I don't know. I kind of think the total's a little higher than you're saying. I don't have a good number or a good feel for that. Where did the Vikings end up today? Vikings Commanders 44.5, 43.5. I think it has to at least be above that. Probably more like 46.5 if I had to guess, but I think from a side perspective, I think we're kind of in line there. And then the last 1:00 game, we could try and talk about this. It's the Saints Steelers, and the Steelers were off this week, and the Saints don't play until tomorrow. Normally, we don't really go through those types of scenarios, but I'd be interested just to hear what you think about this. Saints on the road. They're going to be playing Monday night, and the Steelers coming on an off week. Where would you have this number relative to 3, I guess, is the question.
Are we talking Steelers Saints? We don't have tomorrow night knowing. Okay. Steelers at home. I would say Steelers plus 3.5 total 41.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking, should it open at Saints 3, maybe Saints juiced 3? So we're around the 3. I think we're both leaning to the fact that it wouldn't be in the 2.5 range. Like, if anything, it would be 3 towards 3.5. So, all right, we're on the same kind of page there too. And I do think it's a low total. I think 41.5 is where I would probably have it out there without seeing anything for the rest of the week. So that does get us through the 1:00 games, and Mahomes just fired this overthrown just a little bit.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, he had Kelsey open. He just missed it.
Yeah. Just need to give that a little bit of touch.
Kevin Byard, by the way, has had a fantastic game guarding Kelsey. He was beat on this play.
Yeah, he very much so. So that takes us through the 1:00 games, minus Denver and Tennessee, and the Chiefs Jags, which we can go back to. So 4:00 slate. Colts Raiders, 2 teams that looked incredibly disappointing this week. Colts at Raiders. Colts are still, looking terrible on offense. I don't expect their quarterback play to improve at all. And the Raiders have just continued to play uneven and what seems like not motivated winning football, like not closing teams out. I'll let you lead this one from a spread and total perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, the Raiders are a lot better than I think that their record indicates, right? So I would say, you're talking about like Raiders minus 6.5, right? And I think total, the Colts are so horrendous, and I think it's almost on purpose on offense now with Ellinger in there. Not going to Nick Foles. Even Nick Foles could probably get you a win against a bad team if you got that. So I would say, yeah, you're probably looking at a 6.5 and like a total. The Raiders are decent offensively, maybe 42.5.
Yeah. All right. So I had 43.5. And I did think that would get bet under, to be fair. So if we're assuming that the Raiders don't get really ticked down in terms of their market perception, I think the Colts do probably get knocked down another 0.5 point to a point. If that's the case, it's at least 6. I think 6.5 is completely reasonable. I honestly wouldn't even be shocked if it was 7, just based on how bad the Colts look. And like, who's excited to bet the Colts? Like at this point, like what number would you really need to want to bet the Colts in this game? If it's 7.5, is that?
This reminds me of like when the Cardinals were playing like Blaine Gabbert, or like I'm trying to think of back to like how inept this quarterback is right now. Like the hard part if you're the Colts is like you're not figuring out anything about the rest of your team. Like you're not figuring out if your line can block because your guy is so inept. You're not figuring out about your wide receivers or anything. So I think it's just maybe 7, but the Raiders are the kind of team like I actually think they can move the football normally, especially in a game in a sort of a neutral script, right?
Yeah. So Randy, I probably bet Colts at 7. 7. I mean, I give them a thought. It's not that I'm excited. I'm trying to find a number where it's like there's no way where it becomes an auto bet. So I see the number somewhere around 6, 6.5 is reasonable. And then I'd have to do a little bit of homework to see where I think it goes. Not a game I'd be looking forward to watching though, in all honesty. Next game, let's see. Let's go. There's 2 4:25 games. Let's go Cardinals Rams. Rams is a team in the market that I think is still kind of being judged, by their priors, still not really being adjusted to well. They did have a very, very late, more than a field goal lead today against Tampa on the road. But offensively, they're still struggling greatly. And the Cardinals had a pick 6, if I'm remembering correctly, too. So
Correct.
It's not like their offense was crushing it either, although they did miss a pick in the end zone the other way that would have probably prevented a Seahawks later touchdown. I don't know. I think I opened this probably Rams 3.5, but maybe the market perceives them as even stronger than that. And I think I'm a little bit biased in that. I knocked down the Colts for sure, but that's also knocking down my rating on the Ravens a little bit too. So Rams are at home. Maybe it's more like 4. I think 4 is probably a better number as I'm talking myself through it. And then I don't know, a total, I don't know, around 43, something like that.
Yeah, I think this is where you and I differ because I think it's Rams minus 2.5, and I think the total is like 42.5. The issue is I think as far as if you look at EPA per play, you look at and the Cardinals kind of corrected some of their errors this week with early, like they were one of the worst teams offensively and defensively in the first 15 plays of a game in terms of script. They were horrendous there. And, I think that a big thing was they scored a touchdown on their first drive, for the first time in a while. The Rams can't move the football. Like they're just, I know it's simplistic and defense matters, but even I think now with, Leonard Floyd isn't the edge player he once was. That's why they went after Brian Burns, and like Aaron Donald's great, but not like the best, he's not playing the best right now. Even like their safety position has been a little weaker. Like, I don't think that the Rams, like maybe they put it at 3, but I don't think the Rams are getting the respect that they should. I mean, they were 3-point dogs to a Bucs team that I think the market's cooled on significantly.
And I agree on that both. So like what I set that game at when Rob and I did this last week was I thought it would be either a heavily juiced 3 or 3.5. I thought that's what would be the number, and that was bringing both teams down. So normally about an hour before I do the show, I just quickly write down a couple numbers of what I think for the spreads. And I wrote down either 3 minus 120 or 3.5. I don't know. I think at 4, it would get bet immediately. So I'll stick with 3.5 for now. And I think it goes towards your number. I don't know if it crosses the 3 or not, but I'm certainly not excited at betting the Rams at 3.5 if that's what the number is.
I think the big thing is also this is maybe more to your point. The Rams do have the Cardinals number. It's weird, but like even in this season, the Rams covered a pretty big spread at home. No, on the road against them even in a situation where like they have not been playing well all year, and that has been a problem. So yeah, I might, yeah. It's one of those like San Francisco, LA, Arizona, like non-transitive things, right? Where it does. They do have their number, so maybe it is 3.5.
Okay. And then another game that you were going to have a hard time with priors, and it's just going to seem really weird to say this, but we got Cowboys Packers. Cowboys on the road, coming off of a bye. I mean, I have no idea. I don't know. You want to take a crack at this one go for the side?
I'll say Dallas -4. I'll say total is 44. Dallas is a good enough offense to lift that total up a little bit, but both and Green Bay's defense isn't very good yet. Dallas's defense is very good. So I think Dallas more than a field goal favorite for sure.
Okay. I wrote down 3 and I felt like it wasn't enough. And it's not like we have a ton of time to get ready for this too off the course of the week and look at everything. I don't certainly have any, I know Rob has something to pull in his data right away, which is awesome. From a total, I think it's probably a little bit lower. I was thinking more like 42.5, but I thought the total today, Green Bay, Detroit, even with as bad as the defense is for Detroit, 49.5 was out of line. Again, I didn't make a play, but I thought that was pretty excessive. So I'll be interested. To me, this is the toughest game to lose prior perceptions of what the market thinks of teams and where it should be versus what the market's going to open at. So this is a game like the minute we get off chat and this stream, I'm going to check because I want to see what it opens at. If you're going to hold me to something, I'd say Cowboys 3.5. And then if anything, I think the money goes your way, and I think it goes to -4.
It's so crazy that like the Packers have been here before, not like this bad, but they've been here before. You're just waiting for Rodgers to turn it around, but like the wide receiver position, the offensive line, it's just so much different than it usually is for them.
So Las Vegas, Chris in the chat, thanks for joining. How much do priors affect your handicap by week 4, by week 8, by week 12? What priors do you find significant? For me, it's different. Like, it's not a one size fits all for me. It's especially like this in the NBA too, where sometimes the cast of characters, even though they're the same, the dynamics are just so different. Or let's just say what's the right word? The premier players, the star players are so highly perceived, but they're not playing to that perception at all. And I think Green Bay, Tampa Bay are the two teams that are like that this year. Do some teams have no priors? I think some teams do have like very, 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 very lightly weighted priors. Like at this point, like how much can you really use the Seahawks priors when you're grading them in the market? As an example, like they're a team where I think you have to really grade them a lot more on what they've done this season and kind of throw out everything before that. I don't know, Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you have like so if you have an algorithm that you do not touch, like it's going to be probably 75, 50, 25. Like by the time you get in the postseason, I still think you have priors on, like Tampa Bay in 2020 was like that, right? Where you have this prior on Brady where he had a decent season, but like yards per attempt and all that kind of stuff were kind of low relative to what he's used to. And then like he becomes Tom Brady in the playoffs again type of thing. So I think it depends. Like obviously, like if you manually intervene, like then or sometimes you'll even go back and have some like adjustable priors that helps you sort of get up to speed faster. But like I would say it's at 75, 50, 25. I think most people would be surprised that the preseason prior even comes into play late in the season.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think it's different for offense and defense, right? Like, so offense, it takes a lot less time for what a team has done to become fundamental versus defense. I think it's much more, things. Well, for one, everything's regressed in the offseason more heavily to whether that's the betting lines or, something like that. Whereas, I think that there's a little bit of, the offense and defense are different, right? Like I think offense trends towards an equilibrium quicker.
Yeah, that's also fair. Trying to think of a good example of a team where I'm holding on to their priors more than I probably should. And keep in mind, I am not I've said this on the show before, I'm not a modeler in the same way for this sport that you or Rob are at all. And Las Vegas Chris is asking, after a season like this, do you question the value of priors a little bit more? I say yes, personally, but I think because this league is so driven off of the quarterback, I think that's where you get hung up the most by holding on to a prior potentially a little bit too long. So the Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady hanging on too long. Geno Smith, the opposite, right? Like Geno Smith, we're dealing with something that nobody would even think was in the range of possibilities for him, really. The way that Mariota is playing in Atlanta, granted, he's not throwing for 200, 250 yards a game, but he's still getting that offense and moving down the field. So I think it's just trying to understand when you need to step off the court. And maybe the opposite happened. This is just instinctive. I haven't given this a lot of thought, but it's a good question. Like Drew Brees, like how long did the market hold on to Drew Brees as a X-rated player, whatever it was, before they should have let that go? So that's another guy. Like when are they truly falling off that cliff?
I also think though, like you shouldn't other than like COVID-19, which I think the fundamentals were different. I wonder about letting one season really sort of affect the way that you handicap things, right? Like that to me is like, there's a hard part because like football is a non-stationary game. And so that's where I get a little bit worried because obviously you want to be able to move quickly on when the game changes fundamentally, but you don't want to move with respect to noise too.
That's fair. All right. Looks like Kansas City's around midfield. If they completed this, that looks like a first down, maybe just short. So
I think finally a little bit behind you. Is
okay.
That's Juju? Okay. That's a little short though. They're a bad short yardage team as they showed on that 3rd and 1 in regulation, but they made up for it on 4th and 1, I guess.
So that last game that we just went through, Cowboys Packers, that brings us through the afternoon games. Then we have Sunday night football, which is going to be the Chargers and 49ers, which is an interesting game. And I think I think I've downgraded the Chargers again a little bit. I don't know about you. Not a ton, but just a little bit. This is instinctive. I have the 49ers 3.5. I'm leaning towards 4 even. And wouldn't be surprised if it ended up worse than that. Total, I need to think about that. Maybe 45-ish. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say Niners minus 5.5, 45 is the total. The Chargers have a lot of injuries, so I think that is really the hard part is you don't know if Mike Williams is playing. Or maybe he's on IR, but you don't know. Yeah, Mike Williams is on IR. You don't know if Keenan Allen is playing. You have all the injuries on the offense side of the ball. You have J.C. Jackson's out for the year and so on. So that was really what hampered them today. They had an offense that was really a privilege today because you had a bunch of like D2 players playing, and that was rough. The defense, I thought, actually played really well against an offense that can run the football, and that's kind of their weakness. So that is who the Niners are as well. Niners coming off of a bye, Niners getting a little healthier, with Jimmy G at the helm. They're kind of settling into that. So I think the Niners, purely outclassed Los Angeles in this game. And so I'm making it closer to a touchdown than a field goal.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually think that's, as I hear you talk through it and as I'm thinking through it, I didn't have a great feel. I think this last week, anything more than a field goal for a favorite, I think I was overvaluing a little bit. Now I think I'm overcorrecting a little bit in the other direction. And I'm down on the Chargers. Even though I bet them this week, I'm just fairly down on the Chargers. So I like your numbers way more than mine on this. And it seemed like you were in the same ballpark of a total around 45. And maybe
the question, are the Chargers a playoff team? I think they are. I think if you look at the AFC and the way that the records are distributed, you're really going to need a team to come, like a Jaguars team, to go, from 3-6 to 9-8, right? And you're going to need that's going to be hard for them to do. You're going to need a team like you're going to need the Chiefs missing this third down. They should go for this, but you're going to need a team like the Chargers to fall to like 9-8, 8-9, which, they've already stacked 5 wins together. Good for them. I think they're going to be a playoff team. Do I think that they'll be great in it? No. But.
And let's see, we got one more game before we get back to potentially these two teams that are playing. We got the Commanders at the Eagles. Eagles played Thursday night, so they got a little bit of extra rest. And the Commanders lose a game today that, they probably on the wrong end of a coin flip, like a game they could have easily held on to and win. I don't know, Eagles 10.5, something like that.
Yeah, I said -10. I think total 44.5 or so. The thing that you get with Heineke is the variance, right? Where he could throw a pick. He threw a pick today that basically helped the Vikings score the game-tying touchdown. Their defense has played really well, but I think offensive line for the Vikings is really bad, especially on the interior. And so you're not really getting, when a defensive line does really well against them, like Arizona did the week before, when they play a real offensive line like the Eagles, I think it's going to be harder. Chiefs convert a 4th down here, which is nice.
Yeah.
To see Andy Reid finally doing the smart things.
Yeah, and I like the choice there. If they put this in here, all right. Let me rephrase that.
I don't even know if we we already whatever happens in the next 4 minutes of this game probably has no effect on the betting spread, right? So we could probably just
that's what I was gonna say. Does it really matter? And the answer is no. So let's go back to the 1 o'clocks then. What do we got? Denver at Tennessee. I think the market has finally soured enough on Denver, but are they going to tick up Tennessee a little bit? Because I'd say the market probably had those two teams on a neutral, close to even, where maybe even Denver was maybe quarter-point favorite, half-point favorite, something like that. What do we think now after this game? Does this change anything? And I guess we have to probably think of it in two lineups, whether it's with Malik Willis
or Tannehill.
Or with Tannehill.
Yeah, Willis was a nice little story today, but he's not. He threw for -3 yards in the second half. So, I think if it's Tannehill, it's probably Titans -2.5. I think if it's Willis, it's probably Tennessee -1. I don't know. I struggle to say that they're only 1.5 point different, but you know what I'm like. I think people overestimate that difference as well.
I do too, and given what this team is reliant on too, I'm not saying that the quarterback's not important. That is not what I'm saying at all. But Good choice. I'm with you. So I made my initial number -1, but that was with the idea that Willis was playing. But if Tannehill plays, I don't think it's a full 3 either. So I'm with you there, and I have this as a really a pretty low total. I think like 40.
Yeah, I didn't even give the total, but yeah, I mean, Denver has been in that range all year, right? Tennessee playing those kind of games as well. 39.5 type of game.
Yeah.
And I think the market doesn't feel all that like sheepish about giving away those kind of low totals too.
No, not at all. And then lastly, let's go Jags at Chiefs.
I mean, I would say Chiefs -8.5, total 44.5.
Okay. I wrote down Chiefs 10.5, but I think that's because I hate the Jaguars for multiple reasons. I think it's closer to 10 than it would be to 11 though. So I don't think 8.5 is ridiculous. If it maybe split the difference, maybe it's 9 or 9.5. I don't know. I think it's probably a higher total. I think this is probably somewhere around 46 and a half, something like that. I don't know. It could be higher. So what was this game? This game closed at 46. No, it didn't. What did this game close at?
Yeah, let me look. Here, I'll just look at
this game closed at 45 because of Willis. It probably would have been 46 and a half, 47 without him. So Jags Raiders were 48 today. It closed there. So actually, you know what? This probably has to be
40,
at least
45
48.
is where this closed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this game probably has bigger.
Yeah, that's true. I think, but I also do you think the market downgrades the Chiefs offense? It's sort of like it's oscillated between believing Tyreek Hill didn't matter and Tyreek Hill matters. And I feel like we're on a Tyreek Hill matters kick here.
Well, is that a function of, in this particular game, is this a function of Tennessee's defense being undervalued?
It could be. Yeah, I think there's some secret sauce in Tennessee that no one's really capturing.
Yeah. So I'd say 48 and a half. And then, so I've had 10.5, 48 and a half. We'll check, see, what was right and what was wrong. Are you doing the Monday night preview tomorrow with Rob?
I think I'm doing it with somebody. I think Rob is on vacation, but yeah, Rob and I normally
I didn't know when Rob was. I wasn't sure when Rob was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, how does the Denver defense not ruin Willis in this game?
Good question.
Can we get one Willis designed run?
Yeah.
I think you'll get a designed run. I think you will, Randy.
I think you're going to get the Chiefs selling out to stop Derrick Henry for 2 downs, and they're going to take their chances on 3rd and 4th down.
Yeah, and probably as they should. I mean, you don't want to let Henry beat you, but we'll see what Vrabel calls.
Yeah, Willis is not
calls play action.
Yeah,
throw the ball away or fumble it. Either way, whatever you're about to do. I don't. Jesus. As a Chiefs fan, so if you guys are listening on Monday morning, you're not going to see what Eric's wearing. So he's obviously a little bit invested in this game. He's got his Chiefs shirt on.
I do have some Titans plus 12.5, which is hit, which is nice. But oh my goodness, Malik Willis, what are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, this was horrendous. Can I change my number on the Tennessee game next week already? So I think we covered the entire slate. Did I miss anything? I don't think we did.
Nope.
Saints Steelers, we went through just kind of a brief, as things stand today, and we went to the Chiefs and the Tennessee games too. So that's gonna wrap up our line exercise that we do week in and week out. For a full preview tomorrow, Eric will be there at 8 p.m. on the Hammer Sports Network and on the YouTube and Twitch channel, so live on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe to the Hammer HQ Eric, thanks a lot for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to kind of connect and talk a little bit of football ourselves. And this will release on Apple and Spotify tomorrow morning. So for both of us here at Forward Progress, thank you for joining, and like and subscribe. Talk to y'all soon.